Tonight, we begin with a confrontation that U.S. officials had anticipated, prepared for, and genuinely hoped to avoid. A direct threat from Vladimir Putin that unfolded not over weeks of diplomatic back and forth, but in a single televised statement. Hours that sent shockwaves through European capitals. Hours that forced emergency consultations at NATO headquarters. Hours that prompted the White House to issue one of its firmest responses of the entire conflict. What Vladimir Putin said today crossed a line that the Biden administration had hoped would remain rhetorical. And when that line was crossed, the White House did not hesitate. They responded with clarity, resolve, and unmistakable determination. For several days now, there had been warnings, not from official diplomatic cables, not from formal Kremlin statements, just warnings that Putin was preparing to escalate his rhetoric in response to the latest American weapons package. Putin has been threatening throughout this war, yes, but he has been calculated in his threatening. His public statements have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a predictable escalation ladder. But what set off alarm bells in Washington this week was that the usual pattern shifted dramatically. Intelligence analysts who monitor Russian state media and Kremlin communications know the indicators. The sudden increase in nuclear rhetoric on state television, the unusual scheduling of a presidential address, the coordinated messaging from Russian foreign ministry officials, the strategic leaks to pro-Kremlin media outlets, all of that intensified rapidly. And whenever Putin's messaging machine coordinates this aggressively, it means the Kremlin is preparing to deliver a very specific message to the West. Early this morning, the Kremlin announced what they described as an urgent presidential address regarding Western aggression and Russian security, including explicit references to the newly announced American weapons package that had not been publicly discussed at this level in months. These are the kinds of statements that Putin only makes when signaling something very specific. A red line, a warning, or a direct threat. Western observers didn't know which category this fell into or whether Putin intended all three simultaneously. But what they did know was that Putin was fundamentally changing his public posture toward the Biden administration. And when a nuclear-armed autocrat shifts his rhetoric without diplomatic warning, even by a single degree, every security agency in Washington pays extremely close attention. Putin's message was delivered in characteristically cold, direct terms. He accused the United States of crossing into direct confrontation by approving advanced long-range weapon systems for Ukraine. He warned of consequences that America has not yet imagined. And he said, looking directly into the camera, that Russia would respond with all means at our disposal. This was not diplomatic posturing. This was a direct threat to the President of the United States. The response issued by the White House tonight was not normal diplomatic language. It was not routine acknowledgement. It was not carefully hedged ambiguity. It was firm and unmistakable. Official after official described Putin's threat as reckless, completely unacceptable, and perhaps most importantly, entirely predictable from a leader who has consistently miscalculated Western resolve. But intimidation only works if the target shows fear. The Biden administration did not. In fact, their response today was among the most direct we've seen since the war began. Here's what we know. Within hours of Putin's televised threat, the White House confirmed that the weapons package would proceed as planned. These weren't symbolic defensive systems. These were advanced ATACMS missiles with extended range capabilities, weapons that Ukraine has been requesting for months and that Russia has specifically warned against providing. The administration announced not only that the deal would move forward, but that delivery would be accelerated. Tonight, Pentagon officials confirmed that the weapons package includes capabilities that significantly extend Ukraine's ability to strike military targets deep inside Russian-occupied territory. The administration moved forward before Putin's threat could create political hesitation. They confirmed the ATACMS delivery timeline. They announced additional air defense systems. They approved expanded training programs for Ukrainian forces. In other words, the White House responded to Putin's threat by doubling down on exactly what he was threatening about. This is what made the administration's response so significant. Putin's threat wasn't just bluster, it was designed to create doubt, to fracture Western unity, to make America hesitate. And the White House, understanding that calculation fully, responded with strength. Not provocatively, not recklessly, but firmly and decisively. They didn't delay the weapons package. They didn't soften their language. They accelerated delivery. They reinforced their commitment publicly. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. U.S. intelligence officials now believe Putin's threat was specifically designed to test American resolve after months of congressional delays and visible political divisions over Ukraine funding. Putin wanted to see whether the Biden administration would waver under direct pressure. But instead, the opposite happened. The White House didn't waver. They issued a response so clear, so immediate, that even Kremlin officials appeared caught off guard by the speed. You don't often see the White House move this quickly in response to Russian rhetoric. But today, they did. Senior defense officials speaking with reporters described Putin's calculation as fundamentally flawed, a belief that American political divisions would translate into policy paralysis. But the administration proved today that they remain both unified and determined. Their response was not only swift, it was coordinated so precisely that European allies issued supporting statements within the same hour. That coordination matters because it shows Putin that his strategy of division is failing. It shows that America is not retreating from its commitments. They are reinforcing them. What makes this moment so dangerous and so consequential is that Putin's threat happened when he is under extraordinary pressure domestically. Russian military bloggers want faster progress on the battlefield. Russian hardliners want more aggressive action against Western supply lines. Russian economists are warning about the long-term sustainability of war spending. Russian families are questioning the mounting casualty figures. Putin is balancing these contradictory demands while prosecuting a war that has lasted far longer and cost far more than he ever anticipated. And when leaders in that position make dramatic public threats, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it because their other options are narrowing. The White House statement, now circulating through every diplomatic channel, was designed to signal that America will not be intimidated by nuclear-tinged rhetoric. Officials said plainly that Putin's threats were inconsistent with responsible international behavior. That is diplomatic language for we are not backing down and threats will not change our policy. You don't hear that tone from the White House unless they are sending a deliberate message. National Security Council officials emphasize that America's support for Ukraine remains ironclad and that no amount of Russian intimidation will alter that commitment. The message was clear. Putin miscalculated. Meanwhile, President Biden addressed reporters briefly but pointedly this evening. He said, "We've heard this rhetoric before. It doesn't change our commitment to Ukraine one bit." He said, "America does not make policy based on threats from autocrats." And he said Putin should understand by now that intimidation does not work with this administration. These are not throwaway lines. These are statements from a president who understands that showing any hesitation would be interpreted as weakness and exploited immediately. As the night continues, we expect more analysis of what exactly Putin hoped to achieve with today's direct threat. But what we already know is that the White House response was timely and effective. It reassured nervous allies that American commitment remains solid. It signaled to Russia that threats carry no leverage. And it demonstrated that Western unity is stronger than Putin believes. What happens next will depend on how Putin processes this response. If he backs down from his rhetoric, this moment will be remembered as another failed attempt at intimidation. If he escalates further, the administration has already shown they are prepared to respond in kind. They have shown they will not be bullied. And tonight, for the first time in weeks, the Kremlin appears to be recalibrating. Moscow is quiet, unusually quiet. And when Putin is quiet after making a threat, it means he is processing the response. It means he is reconsidering his next move carefully. Because tonight, Vladimir Putin learned something he should have learned long ago. America does not respond to threats with retreat. This administration does not waver under pressure. And intimidation only strengthens Western resolve. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is absolutely clear. Putin's threat failed to achieve its purpose. The White House stood firm, and the weapons Ukraine needs are on their way. And we will be here watching every development as this critical chapter unfolds.